بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. فإذا ورد الخبر كذلك وانضاف إليه أن يستوي الأمر فيه في الكثرة المذكورة من ابتدائه إلى انتهائه، والمراد بالاستواء ألا تنقص الكثرة المذكورة في بعض المواضع لا ألا تزيد، إذ الزيادة مطلوبة هنا من باب الأولى، وأن يكون مستند انتهائه الأمر المشاهد أو المسموع لا ما ثبت بقضية العقل الصرف كالواحد نصف الاثنين. فإذا جمع هذه الشروط الأربعة وهي عدد كثير، أحالت العادة تواطؤهم أو توافقهم على الكذب، رووا ذلك عن مثلهم من الابتداء إلى الانتهاء، وكان مستند انتهائهم الحس، وانضاف إلى ذلك أن يصحب خبرهم إفادة العلم لسامعه، فهذا هو المتواتر. Thus far, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned two conditions for a hadith to be considered as mutawaatir. The first is that there should be lots of narrators. This large amount is not specified, and each narration will be graded individually and evaluated separately. And the second condition is that the number of narrators must be such that it is generally impossible for such a large group to agree on a lie, and it is also far-fetched for all of them to coincidentally say the same thing. So those are two conditions, and now we will look at the third condition. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, فَإِذَا وَرَدَ الْخَبَرُ كَذَلِكَ, when a khabar is transmitted like this, وَانْضَافَ إِلَيْهِ أَن يَسْتَوِيَ الْأَمْرُ فِيهِ فِي الْكَثْرَةِ الْمَذْكُورَةِ مِنْ ابْتِدَائِهِ إِلَى الْإِنْتِهَائِهِ. And additional to this is that this great amount is equal from the beginning until the end. That means that you have this huge number of narrators in every link from the beginning of the chain until the end of the chain. So the third condition of tawatur is that this huge amount of narrators has to be constant from the beginning of the chain until the end of the chain. It has to be in every link and at every stage of the chain. Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah clarified, وَلَيْسَ الْمَعْنَى أَنَّهُ لَوْ كَانَ الْعَدَدُ أَوَّلًا أَلْفًا مثلا ثم نقص واحد منهم مثلا لم يبق متواترا كما يوهمه ظاهر العبارة. That the meaning is not that, for example, you have 1,000 narrators in one link and then it decreases by one. So now you have 999 in the next link, then it will no more be considered as mutawaatir, as the apparent meaning of this text will make one perceive or make one understand. So this condition means that the narration cannot be narrated by lots of Sahaba and Tabi'in, and then the amount of narrators suddenly drops drastically. The reason why I use the word drastically is because if the number of narrators lessens very slightly, like from 1,000 to 999, or even to 900 for that matter, then this will not cause any harm, because even 900 is still a huge amount. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah now clarifies one point. He says, وَالْمُرَادُ بِالْإِسْتِوَاءِ ألا تنقص الكثرة المذكورة في بعض المواضع لا ألا تزيد، إذ الزيادة مطلوبة هنا من باب الأولى. That the meaning of istiwa, so he used the word أن يستوي الأمر فيه, that the amount of narrators should be equal. There should be an equal amount of narrators in every link. So he is clarifying what he means by equal. He explains that it does not mean that the amount of narrators has to be exactly the same in each and every link and that they cannot increase. Rather, he intends that the amount of narrators should not decrease. So, أَلَّا تَنْقُصَ الْكَثْرَةُ الْمَذْكُورَةُ فِي بَعْضِ الْمَوَاضِعِ. That this mentioned, the huge amount that he mentioned about should not decrease in some links at some places in the chain. لا ألا تزيد. It does not mean that the amount cannot increase. Why? إذ الزيادة مطلوبة هنا. That an increase is sought here. The muhaddith would love that there are more narrators. If you have 1,000 narrators in one link, and in the next link if you have 1,200 narrators, then this year is something which a muhaddith would crave and he would be happy to get. So min babil awla, so all the more reason you will then accept the narration if you have more narrators in the next link. So it simply means that the amount should not drop drastically. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah could have presented this in a better way by merely saying that there must be an equal or a larger amount at every stage of the sanad. And from the explanation of Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah, if it is just a little short but it does not affect the great number, then too it will be accepted. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah now explains the fourth condition of tawatur, وَأَن يَكُونَ مُسْتَنَدُ انْتِهَائِهِ الْأَمْرَ الْمُشَاهَدَ أَوِ الْمَسْمُوعِ. That the end information, that means the group, the information which the first group is informing, it should be something which could be seen, which they saw themselves, or something which they heard themselves. So the fourth condition is that the narrators of every link actually must narrate something that they witnessed themselves with their senses. So al-mushahad, they saw it themselves, or al-masmu', or they heard it themselves. لا ما ثبت بقضية العقل الصرف. It should not be something that is proven by pure conjecture, or which a person makes up with his intellect, with his own mind. كالواحد نصف الاثنين. For example, like saying that one is half of two. Sums are not something that is perceived by one's senses, isn't? Even if it is a simple sum that almost every person on the planet knows, like one being half of two, it cannot be considered as mutawaatir because people had to use their intellect and their mental abilities to arrive to that conclusion. It's not something which was attained through the senses. In the context of Ḥadīth, the Sahabi at the beginning of the chain, he should not say that I think the Prophet ﷺ said. Rather, he must clearly mention that I saw the Prophet ﷺ doing, or I heard the Prophet ﷺ saying. Likewise, the Tabi'i, he must clearly say that he also saw the Sahabi, or he heard directly from the Sahabi. In this way, in every link, the narrators should say that they saw or they heard. They should not say that they assume or they think, etc. So this is the meaning of this clause. In Fawatih al-Rahamut, it is mentioned, المراد بالاستناد إلى الحس أن يكون الخبر في المحسوسات لا أنهم أخبروا بأنهم أحسوا. They must be mentioning something which they saw or which they attained through their senses, not something which is from their intellect and from their mind. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah uses the words al-mushahad aw al-masmu', and that covers only two senses, mushahad seeing and masmu' hearing. However, in the books of usul al-fiqh, all five senses are mentioned. So the reason why only two senses were mentioned here is because these are the two senses that are commonly used for narrating a hadith. Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah says خصهما بالذكر اعتبارا للغالب وإلا فالشرط انتهاؤه إلى مطلق الحس الشامل للحواس الخمس الظاهرة من الذوق واللمس والشم والسمع والبصر كما يشعر به الكلام فيما بعد. So أخصهما بالذكر اعتبارا للغالب. The reason why he only mentioned these two senses is because these are the two senses which are generally used to transmit a hadith. Otherwise it encompasses all five senses. However, Allama al-Qani rahimahullah quotes from the teacher of his sheikh that all the other senses fall under the category of al-mushahad. He wrote, وَالْمُرَادُ بِالْمُشَاهَدِ مَا يُدْرَكُ بِالْحَوَاسِ الْخَمْسِ الظَّاهِرَةِ غَيْرَ السَّمْعِ بقرينة عطفه عليه فدخل ما كان مستند الإخبار به مبصرا أو مشموما أو ملموسا أو مسموعا إلا ما كان مستند الإخبار فيه الخبر عن ذلك. So he's mentioning that all the other senses are encompassed and included in the word mushahad, and a masmu' narrating something which a person hears is encompassed with the word masmu'. Now here there is one essential point that I want to mention regarding this last condition, that it should be something which people perceive and they attain this information with their own eyes or with their own ears. So this last condition is sufficient to explain why Muslims do not accept the Hindu gods, despite the fact that it is transmitted via a huge group of people. This is because the initial group does not transmit something which is perceived with the five senses. They did not see all of these gods. So some contemporary Muslim scholars like Sheikh Akram Nadwi, etc., they were influenced by Orientalists, and thus they also reject the whole concept of Tawaatur. They argue that there are over 1 billion Hindus who believe in multiple gods. So why is it that the gods are not regarded as Mutawaatir? And if it's regarded as Mutawaatir, then it's incumbent to believe on it. So these scholars are ignoring this last condition of Mutawaatir, that the report should not be made up by one's imagination. Rather, it should be something that is perceived by the five senses. Mullah Abdul Hayy al-Lakanawi rahimahullah, he says, فَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ مِصْرَ أخبروا بحدوث العالم أو بوجود الصانع لا يكون هذا الخبر متواترا. That if anyone has to mention anything that was not perceived by one's five senses, then it will not be considered as mutawatir. Likewise, the fact that such a huge amount of followers of the other religions mention that their religion is the final religion, that too is not considered as mutawatir. Allama al-Qani rahimahullah says, وَلَا يُشْكَلُ على الأصل إخبار اليهود قاطبة عن تأبيد دين موسى وعدم نسخه، لأن ذلك ليس إخبارا مستندا لمحسوس، فإن موسى ما قال لهم ذلك. So this here is not something which they perceived with their five senses. They didn't even hear it directly from Musa alayhi salam, because obviously Musa alayhi salam did not mention that his religion is the final religion. So it's something which they just made up with their own intellect, and therefore it will not be considered as mutawatir. Even with regards to the crucifixion, even though such a huge group of Christians believe that Jesus, peace be upon him, was killed, the very first group was just a few in number. Mullah Abdul Hayy al-Lakanawi rahmallah explains this by saying, قلت ليس عدم تواتره لعدم الإسلام بل لعدم بلوغ عدد أصل المخبرين بقتله حد التواتر. We are not saying that we are not believing or we're not accepting the narration as tawatur because they were not Muslims. Because we have explained that even if a huge group of non-Muslims have to inform you of something, then too it will be considered as mutawaatir. So the reason why we are not accepting this as tawatur is because they do not have this huge amount of people who witnessed the crucifixion. فإن الذين دخلوا على عيسى وزعموا قتله كانوا 7 أو 6 والغالب أنه لا يحصل العلم بإخبار هذا العدد فالمخبرون لم يبلغوا حد التواتر في الطبقة الأولى. There's only 6 or 7 people who mentioned it. So from the very first group there is no tawatur. Now returning back to the text, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah makes a full circle. He just mentioned the 4 conditions, but he now mentions them all again. So he says, فَإِذَا جَمَعَ هَذِهِ الشُّرُوطَ الْأَرْبَعَةَ. When a narration gathers all these 4 conditions, and I explain to you again what these 4 conditions are. Maybe because of how he digressed, and like we explained, because maybe he felt that others before him who wrote in this field did not elaborate on tawatur, and therefore he decided to elaborate, or maybe he just took his students' notes. So he explains the first condition is that adadun kathir, there is a large group of narrators. So this is the first condition. Now in the print of Shaykh Nuruddin Itr rahmallah, which I understand all of you are using this print, so if you focus on the format, it will appear that the large amount is the first condition, and then you have the explanation of this first condition, and that is that it is impossible for them to unite or coincidentally agree on a lie, because this is how he mentioned it. He put a dash, and then he said عدد كثير أحالت العادة تواطؤهم أو توافقهم على الكذب. But you may have noticed that in the beginning, when I was quoting the ibara, then I said عدد كثير, and I paused, and then I said أحالت العادة تواطؤهم أو توافقهم على الكذب. So it makes you, the way Shaykh Nuruddin Itr is putting it, it makes you understand that this here is the first condition. That the first condition is عدد كثير أحالت العادة تواطؤهم أو توافقهم على الكذب. So that's the first condition, and then he regards the fourth condition to be that the narration gives one full conviction. So this is what you understand from the copy of Shaykh Nuruddin Itr, and also from other copies. I'm just mentioning this copy because all of you are using this copy. But remember, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he did not put the conditions into point form or in number form. He did not put the format like this. So the correct division of the 4 conditions is adadun kathir. That's the first condition. And then أحالت العادة تواطؤهم أو توافقهم على الكذب. This is the second condition. This is how Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah explained it. He said فيتحصل أن الكثرة هي الشرط الأول. That the large amount, that's the first condition, and we have explained this here in the previous lessons as well. And then وإحالة العادة هي الشرط الثاني. That them being so much that it is impossible for them to agree on a lie, or it is very difficult to believe that they could all just come up mentioning the same thing. So he's saying that will be the second condition. But now if you're going to accept that last point as the condition, then you're going to have 5 conditions. وَالشُّرُوطُ خَمْسَةٌ عَلَى مُقْتَضَى كَلَامِ الْمُصَنِّفِ حيث قال فيما سيأتي فإذا جمع هذه الشروط الأربعة. So therefore it's better that we put this here as the second condition, and that وَانْضَافَ إلى ذلك, we do not regard that as a condition, rather we regard that as the outcome. Few pages later, Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah said وَهِيَ الْأَرْبَعَةِ أَحَدُهَا, that the first is عدد كثير, that there must be a great number. وَثَانِيهَا الْمُسْتَفَادُ مِنْ قَوْلِهِ بِلَا عَدَد. So you can see that the word adadun kathirun is the first condition, and thereafter is the second condition begins. And this is the same explanation that is given in an-Naḍar. Likewise, al-Malakani rahimahullah, he also said that قوله أحالة العادة إلى آخره شرط ثانٍ. So dividing the conditions in this way also confirms what the four conditions that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned earlier. And this is the best way to look at it, despite seeing numerous different explanations in the various commentaries. Another point is that Hafiz Ibn Hajar rahimahullah uses the word at-tawātu' and at-tawāfuq. So in explaining the differences between these two terms, Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah quotes from the author, from Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. He says, نُقِلَ عَنِ الْمُصَنِّفِ أَنَّهُ قَالَ فِي الْفَرْقِ بَيْنَهُمَا. It has been transmitted from Ibn Hajar rahimahullah himself that he said, إِنَّ التَّوَاطُعَ هو أن يتفق قوم على اختراع معين بعد المشاورة والتقرير بأن لا يقول أحد خلاف صاحبه. The tawatu means that the group got together, they discussed it amongst themselves, and they all agreed. No one disagreed with them. This is the meaning of tawatu. And tawafuq is حصول هذا الاختراع من غير مشاورة بينهم ولا اتفاق. And the second is that they did not discuss it. So it's just coincidental that they are saying the same thing. So tawatu is a pre-planned agreement when many people agree on something after discussing, and tawafuq is coincidental agreement when many people have the same view concerning something despite the fact that they did not discuss the issue. So the first condition is adadun kathirun, there must be this large amount. The second condition is أحالت العادة تواتؤهم أو توافقهم على الكذب. The third condition رووا ذلك عن مثلهم من الابتداء إلى الانتهاء. That they narrate it from their likes from the beginning till the end. That means in every link you have this huge group of people. It does not decrease drastically. وَكَانَ مُسْتَنَدُ انْتِهَائِهِمْ الْحِسْ. The fourth condition, the information should be based on the senses. After mentioning the four conditions, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَانْضَافَ إِلَى ذَلِكَ أَن يَصْحَبَ خَبَرَهُمْ إِفَادَةَ الْعِلْمِ لِسَامِعِهِ. So you can see we are not taking this as a condition, rather we are regarding it as an outcome. So he's saying, and additional to this is that the khabar gives the benefit of knowledge to its listener. That the person, when he listens to, when he sees so many people narrating this to him, what they clearly saw or they heard with their own ears, and it's like they narrating from many people, then he will be convinced. So he will get absolute conviction. He will not have an iota of doubt. He won't have any reservations. فَهَذَا هُوَ الْمُتَوَاتِرُ. Then this is Mutawaatir. So وَانْضَافَ إِلَى ذَلِكَ أَن يَصْحَبَ خَبْرَهُمْ. If this is considered to be a condition, then we will have a total of 5 conditions. Therefore, instead of considering this as a condition, because there are only 4 conditions, we consider this as the outcome of the 4 conditions. So remember this point and remember the 4 conditions as I have mentioned it. However, some scholars regarded this as an integral condition, because they say that even if these 4 conditions are fulfilled, that you have lots of people narrating it and you cannot even doubt that such a huge group have agreed on a lie, or coincidentally they are all just saying the same thing. Likewise, it's in every link and they are mentioning something which was perceived with their senses, etc. Then too, if you do not get firm conviction, then it will not be considered as mutawaatir. So therefore, they said that it is a condition. It's not the outcome, rather it is the condition. But the easy way is to understand it as we have explained it. You have those 4 conditions and this is the outcome. Because generally when these 4 conditions is fulfilled, then a person will be convinced. Now here when Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah talks about ilm, what exactly does he mean? So Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah explained, والمراد بالعلم هنا الضروري وهو الذي يضطر إليه كما سيجيء سواء كان نظريا أو لا يعني عقليا أو نقليا. So the meaning is علم الضروري, that the minute a person hears it, he will accept it. So it is a person is forced to accept that knowledge, and we will elaborate more about it when Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah speaks. But just here, because Ibn Hajar is speaking about ilm, so this is the type of knowledge and conviction which a person should get. That he should have he shouldn't have an iota of doubt. He should have absolute no reservations. He should be willingly accept that information. In fact, وَالَّذِي يَضْطَرُّ إِلَيْهِ, he'll be forced to accept it. If a person, such concrete evidence is brought before him and he does not accept it, then the fault is his. The fault is not with the information. Now we mentioned earlier that the term Tawaatur was not defined before Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, and likewise it was not even explained in full. And after Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, it merely became a conglomeration of all the conditions that he mentioned here. So when he initially wrote Nukhbatul Fikr in the year 812 Hijri, then the definition was still very vague. Mullah al-Qari rahimahullah says, وَالْحَقُّ أَنَّهُ لَا يُسْتَفَادُ تَعْرِيفُ الْمُتَوَاتِرِ بِكَمَالِهِ مِنَ الْمَتْنِ. If a person only goes to the original text, to Nukhbatul Fikr, he won't get the full meaning of Mutawaatir. But after a few years, when Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah wrote Nuzha an-Naḍar and explained all of these conditions, then scholars began to define the term Tawaatur in light of what he wrote. Thus, based on all that he wrote, the meaning of Tawaatur is خبر جماعة عن محسوس بلغ الكثرة مبلغا تحيل العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب فيه بلا حصر عدد معين. So the meaning of a mutawatir is the report of a group, of a great group, a huge group, on something that they witnessed. And there were so many in number that generally it would be impossible for such a large group to collude on a lie. بلا حصر عدد معين, and this huge amount is not defined. So this is the literal meaning. To make it even simpler, we can just say that the meaning of mutawatir is the report of an extremely large and unrestricted group of people on something that they witnessed themselves. So the report of an extremely large and unrestricted group of people on something that they witnessed themselves. Then, when explaining the meaning of how many they should be, we can say that there must be so many that it is generally impossible for them to lie. So this here is the definition which Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah gave in the field of ulum al-hadith. This became then the official definition derived from all the so long explanation of Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. But now we need to look at the Hanafi madhab. When the Hanafis talk about mutawatir, then what do they mean? Do they have the same meaning like what Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned here? Do they have the same additions, or do they refer to something else as mutawatir? So we mentioned previously that it was from the very early scholars within the Hanafi madhab. Although from Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah or his direct students we don't have anything, but the student of Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, Imam Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah, he wrote about Mutawaatir. Unfortunately, his books did not reach us, but fortunately, Alama Jassas Razi rahimahullah quoted 90% of all that Isa ibn Aban rahimahullah wrote. So Alama Jassas Razi, he many times quotes long passages, and that gives us the great benefit of knowing what Isa ibn Aban wrote. So inshallah in the next lesson we will focus on this. We will take it from Isa ibn Aban how he defined, and when he spoke about Mutawaatir, then what exactly did he mention, and then scholars after him, what they mentioned about Mutawaatir. Inshallah, we'll discuss all of this in the next lesson. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa